Hey, this video has spoilers for the FNAF movie, so be careful, watch at your own risk. Eee. Hey guys, I'm Jago, and this year I set myself a challenge. Now, 2023 is apparently the year that Springtrap canonically rises up in Five Nights at Freddy's. What this means is he basically is supposed to wake up at this point. He comes out the back room, he wanders around for a bit, and he becomes sus in events. And as a lot of you know, Springtrap is probably one of my all-time favourite characters, not just in FNAF but in general. So to celebrate this year, I set myself this challenge. I made a promise. Basically, every month I would do a full detailed Springtrap drawing. And so far, I've managed to keep it up. And since I'm now doing these new videos, I thought I could make this one into a new video. Now, the trailer for the movie has come out, and I absolutely love this shot here. It reveals Spring Bonnie, whether it's Spring Bonnie, it's kind of Springtrap, it's close enough. I mean, I did Scrap Trap 1 month, so, you know, variations of him do work. But yeah, basically I redrew this shot. I went way out of my comfort zone for this. I did so many new things, but I'm actually really pleased with how it turned out. Also, on the day that I did this, I actually had my first ever driving lesson, so I'll be talking about how that went while doing the drawing. So without further ado, let's get going. So at first I had an idea that was different to how it ended up. At first I wanted to recreate this shot using Springtrap's original FNAF 3 design. It's a design I'm more comfortable with, it's a design I've drawn loads of times and I know well, and I thought it'd be a really cool thing to do. So I hopped into Blender and I started posing a model for a reference. This model is by Roots36. I do this a lot when doing my FNAF pieces. It just really helps get your angles right and have a reference that is exactly the angle you need, rather than having to scroll through Google and find the unsavoury FNAF content that you often find. Even though I didn't end up going through this idea, it was still helpful to have it there. So I thought I'd be okay going straight into my normal refined sketch. This is because I'm so used to doing Springtrap, this is how I normally do it. However, I quickly realised that I probably am going to need construction lines. I thought that everything would be fine because it was all just curves and I could, you know, just relate the curves to where they are. But it just wasn't working out. Like, just look at the eye, I couldn't do it. So I went into my construction lines. Basically, this is a really rough shape. One thing I was doing was almost like when you're doing traditional art and you use your pencil for measurements. I was drawing a line down the reference and having a feel for how long it took to draw that line. I'd then replicate that line using the same field of the length, and that helped me to get things like the centre of the muzzle. Other things were easy to equate to areas. So for example, with the knife, I equated the fact that the point is ever so slightly at the edge of the head, and the edge of it slightly cuts off the nose. Using that, I was able to get an angle for it that worked. Struggled with the teeth a bit, he looked really goofy for a while, so then I decided to just make sure I have the general curve in and not try to do each individual tooth yet. I also extended it a bit so his ears were visible. I just thought this added a bit more character. Now finally, I felt more confident to go into my refined sketch. I set up size so that I had two canvases open. One was where I was drawing and one was my reference image. This meant I could zoom into my main canvas and still be able to see the reference. Now, how I usually draw Springtrap is I curve the edge of the eye and the muzzle together, basically. I do them in one line. So to have a muzzle that actually properly joins at the top is quite foreign to how I do Springtrap. So that's quite unusual for me. Also, the jaw shape was quite unusual for me. I felt like it was sticking out too much at first. But I decided I'm just going to do the sketch. I can do another sketch if need be, and I can sort of manipulate and form things how they need to be. I did my lines in my usual manner. Because this is a design that I'm really not comfortable comfortable with. I really had to make sure I was following my sketch closely, and that's why I spent so much time refining that sketch and make sure it was okay. Now, it was while I was doing my lines that I had to leave for a bit to do my first driving lesson, and that was an experience. So I'm learning a manual, or a stick shift as it's called in America. That's because here in the UK we have way more manuals than we do automatics. So basically I have a clutch to deal with. So there's this huge car park down the beach. Every instructor uses it for their first time drivers, which is what I was. However, it was a beautiful summer's day and school had just finished and the splash park was open and there were children everywhere. Running out in front of me, running behind me, running to the side of me, running just all over the place. And then there were the parents and people that just weren't looking, and the amount of times I had to slam my brakes on. Like, brand new driver, never been in the car before, absolutely terrified of what was going on, having to constantly avoid all these people. Like, the amount of times my instructor had to use her pedals because people were just walking out in front of me. God, it was terrifying. And then it's the fact that the car park had loads of parked cars as well. So I was basically slaloming around all these cars while I was still trying to get used to the steering and quite often oversteering. Oh, it was terrifying, man. It was absolutely terrifying. Thankfully, though, I sort of did well. My clutch control was pretty decent. Being able to find that bite and then take my foot off the brake and be able to roll to a start and then get myself going, I was able to do that. I did my first gear change. That went well. Only went up to second at the most, but it was still good. I struggled with parking into a bay. I could get in there fine, but straightening myself up kept going wrong and I kept ending up at such an angle that I would have hit a car if it was next to me. It was quite funny, really. Yeah, that's how my first driving lesson went. Next lesson, I'll be on the road. Once my lesson was done, I came back and continued lying this guy. It was quite late by the time I'd finished the lining, so I saved the colouring for the next day, and I basically spent all day finishing this. I started at about 10 in the morning and finished about 5 in the afternoon. Now, initially I was going to do my normal style of shading and colouring, where I do the flat colour, I take my watercolour brush and do a sort of rough texturing, and I use my overlay layers and all that to do my shading. However, this lighting had so many different tones in it. I mean, all the green in it just wouldn't be easy to do if I was doing it purely in shading, and I just naturally went into a more painted style. Now, I don't paint often, I'm not a very good painter, but it was really fun to try on this piece. Regardless, before I did that, I did do some flat colouring to make sure everything was sort of the right colours, able to get going on them. And then I went on and added in the background roughly so I could have that idea of lighting. Now, it took me quite a while to really get going with the painting. At first I was going to add in the shadows, but then I thought, no, it's more dark than it is light, I need to start with a darker tone. So I did that and then went in to do the highlights, but then I thought, no, this just looks really bad, what's going on? So then I deleted all that and decided, right, first things first, I'm gonna fill in where it's really dark. So basically these parts where the suit has a hole and it's going inwards, I just filled those areas in to start off with. And then I went on to painting again. This time I was slower and more methodical. I started with that really obvious shadow that's sort of on his brow, right at the top of his muzzle and between his eyes. I had a texture on, but it wasn't that visible of a texture yet. I was more interested in just blocking out the tones and colours where they would be. Now the eyes, I decided to go straight in and do the detail on them. They were quite different to Springtrap's normal eyes. Now you may think they don't look that different, but in terms of drawing them, they felt quite different. So basically to do those iris lines, I enacted the age-old method of scribbling. Took my watercolour brush and just very lightly scribbled over basically. I was so totally lazy and just copy and pasted it over to the other eye. Once I'd done this, I started working on really detailed painting. This is where I'd get the sharper lines and shadows in and start to get those textures in there as well. I did this all with one brush. This is my watercolour brush. The watercolour brush is basically a paintbrush, except it really is reacts to your pressure sensitivity. You push down hard, you get a nice bit of saturated colour, and then you can blend it out using a light pressure. It's really nice to use for painting. I use it all the time for my painting. I never touch my actual paintbrush. As for the texture, I had it on blots and noise and blurber on quite a high intensity for both. Now, this version of Springtrap in the movie has a bit of fluff around him, so I took my watercolour brush again and changed it to have a sort of stringy texture. I then feathered out some almost fur around the edges. You can see on this part of the reference it has a really bright bit of fur being illuminated from the back. So I rubbed this in and put it behind because it has such a harsh outline on it. However, that sort of black line art was really making it pop too much. It didn't look like it was part of him. So I ended up actually using preserve opacity to colour in my line art. It still kept that harsh shape, but it also made it blend in a lot better. Now there are areas that I felt like were a little bit flat, so what I did was made some overlay layers and did my normal shading that I would have done. I did this in a very minimal way. I only did it where there would be really dark shadows, and then also where there would be really harsh highlights. It's basically just made everything pop a bit more, gave it all a bit more depth and dimension. The final thing for me to do here was effects. This is why I added my own flair to it. I absolutely love glowing effects. They look amazing every time. I just love doing it. So I added a hard mix layer to the eyes to add some glow there. Then using my scatter brush and a circle pattern, I added some very light sort of dust particles in the background. And I did a few in the foreground as well. I made sure these ones in the foreground were very blurred to really make the focus on Springtrap himself. I then used this stock image lens flare I have, and I used those to add to the eyes and on the edge of the knife. Just really giving a nice shine. After making sure everything was in proper focus according to the focal length, he was pretty much done. And that's it, there's my Springtrap art for this month. Now, I know there are going to be people saying, oh, that is a Springtrap. And you know what I say to that? You're probably right. Look, I know this probably isn't Springtrap, that it's very likely that William or Steve or whatever he's going to be called in the movie is alive in there and using it as the suit. You know, just like how in Silver Eyes, Dave Miller does that. But as I said, I've been kind of doing variations of Springtrap this year as well. So I think this counts. I think that you can safely say this counts for the Springtrap challenge. So yeah, that's it for today. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. That's all from me. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!